Hey, welcome. So you've put in the work. You've spent hours and hours mastering English grammar, you've memorized all the rules, and you've perfected your sentence structure. You did everything by the book. And seriously, props to you for that. But it's probably led you to a really specific, kind of confusing question. You've noticed it, right? You hear native speakers constantly bending, breaking, and sometimes just completely ignoring the very rules you worked so hard to learn. And it can be so frustrating. You start to wonder, wait, am I hearing this wrong or was my textbook wrong? Well, the answer is a little bit of both, and it's way more interesting than you think. Okay, let's look at a classic example that probably drives you nuts. Your textbook drilled the sentence on the left into your head, if I had known. But then you listen to pretty much any casual conversation, and you're going to hear what's on the right, if I would have known. So is it a mistake? Well, technically, yes. Is it common? Oh, absolutely. And figuring out why this happens is the real key to unlocking that next level of fluency. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with what I call the native speaker paradox. Then we'll do a quick tour of the most common so-called mistakes. After that, we'll dig into the why by looking at the rules versus how people actually talk. Then we'll build a practical playbook for your professional life. And finally, we'll talk about shifting our goal from perfection to just speaking with confidence. So let's just get one thing straight. These aren't just random, sloppy errors. It's not like native speakers are just forgetting their own language. What you're hearing is a language that's alive, it's breathing, it's changing. These mistakes actually follow their own secret patterns. And once you understand them, you're going to be a huge step closer to sounding truly natural. Okay, let's play a little game of have you heard this one before? I'm going to bet you have. For this next part, just listen and see which of these you recognize. This is all about validation. You're not going crazy and you're not mishearing things. This stuff is everywhere. First one up, fewer versus less. The rule is super simple, right? Fewer for stuff you can count, like cookies, and less for stuff you can't, like water. So why does every supermarket have a 10 items or less lane? It's because in fast, everyday speech, less is just easier and quicker to say. It's a perfect example of our brains taking a little shortcut, even if it's not technically correct. Oh, here's another one you hear all the time. The rule book says adverbs like well describe verbs like saying, but saying he sang really good is just incredibly common. I mean, you hear it everywhere. It's the kind of thing even highly educated speakers will say when they're just talking informally, prioritizing the flow of the conversation over being perfectly grammatical. Now, what's really fascinating about this one is that it's not just random, it's often regional. Hearing I should have went or he's already drank 2 coffees is super common in certain American dialects. Technically, it's incorrect. You're supposed to use the past participle, gone or drunk. But for millions of native speakers, this is just how they talk. It's natural for them. And this is where grammar becomes art, you know? It's not math. Grammatically, 2 negatives are supposed to make a positive. So I don't have no money should technically mean I have some money. But nobody uses it that way. In a lot of dialects, and of course in music, it's all about emphasis. It's a stronger way of saying, I really don't have any money. It breaks the logic to add emotion. This is a really important point. Some of the most common mistakes aren't speaking mistakes at all, they're writing mistakes. Think about it. Words like your and your or affect and affect sound pretty much identical when we speak. So, of course, even native speakers get them mixed up when they're typing fast. It's a direct result of how spoken language doesn't always translate perfectly to the written word. Okay, so we've seen the what. Now it's time to get to the why. Why is there this giant gap between the English in your textbook and the English you actually hear every day? Well, the answer is in 2 totally different ways of looking at grammar. First up, you've got prescriptive grammar. This is the grammar you learned in school. It's the official rulebook. It prescribes or tells you how the language should be used. It's structured, it's clear, and it's absolutely essential for things like formal writing. This is our foundation. But then we have descriptive grammar. Now, this isn't about rules. It's about watching and listening. It just describes how people actually use the language in their real lives. So if prescriptive grammar is the official rulebook for a game, descriptive grammar is like a sports commentator just describing what the players are actually doing on the field. And sometimes, they bend the rules to make a great play.
Let's look at the perfect example of this in action, the journey of the singular they. For centuries, the prescriptive rule made us say clunky things like his or her, but people just naturally started using their for a single person. It was easier, it was faster, it just made sense. For decades, it was seen as a mistake, but so many people did it that eventually the rule books had to catch up. And now, it's accepted as perfectly correct grammar. That's language evolving right in front of our eyes.
So, what does all this mean for you, especially in a professional setting where you need to sound credible? Look, the key isn't to just start copying every mistake you hear. The key is to become a strategic speaker who knows exactly when to follow the rules and when it's okay to bend them. Okay, in those high-stakes professional moments, especially in writing, prescriptive grammar is your best friend. There are certain errors that can just make you look careless. Mixing up your and your in an email to a client, using words like informations, or having big subject-verb agreement errors in a report. These are what I call credibility killers. You really want to avoid these. On the other hand, here are the mistakes that are so common in native speech that you really don't need to sweat them. Saying there's lots of people in a team meeting, I promise nobody will even notice. Starting a story with me and my friend went to lunch, it's actually way more common than the correct version. And that old rule about not ending a sentence with a preposition, just forget about it. It sounds way more natural to ask, who are you talking to? So, how do you decide what to do? It's all about context. Just use this as a quick mental checklist. Who are you talking to? Is it your boss or your buddy? What's the setting? A formal presentation or a casual team meeting? And what's the medium? A written report needs to be precise, but a spoken conversation gives you a lot more flexibility. Getting good at this kind of code switching is really the sign of an advanced speaker. And that brings us to the final, and honestly, the most important part of this whole thing. The goal was never just to memorize a bunch of rules. The real goal is to communicate, to connect with people, and to feel confident when you're doing it. So let's try to shift our mindset away from just avoiding errors. Here's the secret I want you to remember. Speaking isn't like writing. It's a live performance. It's messy and improvised. Even native speakers will start a sentence, realize halfway through it's not going where they want, and then change direction. Those little pauses and restarts, those aren't signs of failure. They're just signs of a brain working in real time. It's totally 100% normal. So what happens if you're in a big meeting and you make a mistake? First of all, don't panic. Seriously, everybody does it. If the mistake actually makes your message confusing, just make a quick correction. If not, just move on. Don't draw a big red circle around it. The most important thing is what you're trying to say. Your ideas are always more important than perfect grammar. So this is the big mental shift. For years, your goal has probably been grammatical perfection. But at this advanced level, the goal changes. It's not about being perfect anymore. It's about clear, confident communication. It's about making sure people understand you, connecting with them, and getting your ideas across effectively, even if it's not always by the book. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. When you open your mouth to speak English, what are you really aiming for? The cold, sterile perfection of a textbook, or the warm, dynamic connection of a real conversation? Because understanding that difference is what will finally help you speak with the kind of confident fluency you've been working so hard for.
Thanks for being with us. See you on our next video. Let's speak up.